And this is Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services, Talking Business, our interview series talking with leaders in the field of banking, insurance, customer service, digital education, and business education, all to highlight the work of our team at CBSI in Harrison, New York, providing benefits to the credit card and consumer banking industry and customer service management. They've been doing a great job taking care of our clients during this COVID-19 pandemic period. Now, today we have a chance to talk to someone who's both an outstanding business leader and a business educator, and that is Raymond Butkus, who is now the executive lecturer at St. Peter's University in the School of Business and runs the Center for Leadership Studies. Ray, how are you today?
Ken, it's great to see you again. I'm doing well in spite of these trying times in which we all live. So great to be here and great to be your guest.
Yeah, just tell us maybe how has the COVID period been for you? How has it been at St. Peter's? I mean, teaching the quick shift to online education last spring and now more online education this year. What has it been like for you? How have you adapted?
Yeah, you know, we spent all summer working on a hybrid learning plan whereby half of the classes would be delivered in person and half of the classes would be delivered virtually using the same telecom techniques that we're using for this interview. And 2 weeks before the start of the semester, we had a spike in infections in Jersey City, and the decision was taken by the provost that we would be in an all virtual mode for the fall semester. Now that has led to some challenges for sure. It is part of the draw of a St. Peter's education is small classes. Our typical class size is 22, 24 students. A large one is 30 students. And so what that means is very personalized instruction. So as an educator, if you see a student that's kind of not quite getting it, if you discern that the light bulbs are not going off, you know, you can walk over to that student, you can give them some extra help, you can ask another question, you can rephrase what you've just said. That is very difficult to do in an online learning mode. And online learning modes take, in spite of the fact that they've gotten much better, both Google GoToMeeting, Zoom, and this GoToMeeting technology has improved dramatically over the last 6 months. In spite of that, there's some inherent limitations. You know, this is not TV grade video, so it's very difficult to discern facial inflections. The audio is not as good, so it makes teaching much more challenging, and it makes learning more challenging too.
But it is good to be able to see people, and I think as we become a little bit isolated, working in home offices largely, being able to see our colleagues and our clients and friends in the business makes a big difference. Now, Ray, we met when you were president of Donnelly Marketing a few years ago, but you've had a long career. You started with a tenure 20 years at AT&T in sales. Maybe take us through your start after serving in the U.S. Army, working at AT&T, and some of the other leadership roles that you have fulfilled in your career.
Yeah, sure, Ken. I'd be happy to. You know, I was an officer, regular Army in U.S. Army Signal Corps. Signal Corps is the telecommunications branch of the Army.
Sure.
When I got out of the service after about 4 years, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I did know that I wanted to stay within the telecom industry. And when we were on field exercises, we always used to say, hey, we want to get this signal as good as the Bell system. So I decided, hey, what better place to try to work than the Bell system? So I was successful in landing a job at AT&T, and I started in New Orleans, Louisiana, in the year I got out of the Army. And a year later, I was promoted to a sales management job in Atlanta. A year after that, I was promoted again to another position. 3 years later, I was promoted to a position in White Plains, New York. And so I have been in the telecom industry for 20 years in both sales management, marketing, and general management. My last assignment was running a 700-person sales organization responsible for all AT&T business from Maine to Virginia. I was attracted by the siren call of the internet and was recruited out of there to build a startup venture by an entrepreneur who had a great idea but didn't know much about running companies. And we built a nice little business and were able to sell the business. I was recruited from there by a private equity firm to be the COO of another company, and from that was recruited to be the CEO of a company. So I've had a mixture in my career of both very large Fortune 100 companies, entrepreneurial startup ventures, and mid-size, mid-market companies. The common theme in all of those has been they've been technology oriented. Telecom technology, marketing services technology, database technology for the assistance of marketers. So that's been the common element.
And we're both Providence College alumni, and you were a member of the ROTC program at Providence and served in the U.S. Army. And one of the things we notice about Army officers and NCOs is you learn how to lead people. That's really the essence of the Army is leading people. And you obviously took that experience and did very well in sales management. Now you teach leadership. What was it that you learned in the Army about leadership that has served you your whole career?
Yeah, it's a great observation, Ken. You know, 6 years ago, when I decided to leave the corporate world, I had the opportunity of teaching a course as an adjunct at Seton Hall University, another Big East college, and loved it and really enjoyed it. And I became aware through a friend of a full-time opportunity at St. Peter's. And, you know, when I interviewed, the dean said to me, gee, you know, we'd really like someone to teach leadership. And at that point, it occurred to me, I had been in professional life for 39 years. And of those 39 years, I had subordinates reporting to me. In other words, I was in a leadership position for 38 of those 39 years. So I jumped at the opportunity. Leadership has been a topic, an area of interest of mine all of my adult life. In fact, I told the dean at that interview, I said, you know, I don't think since I was 18, there has been ever a year that's gone by when I haven't read about, thought about, talked about, written about, and practiced leadership. And that training began as an ROTC cadet at Providence College, and later as an officer of the United States Army. One of the key messages I try to impart to our leadership students is that leadership is not about a position. Leadership is not about giving orders. Leadership is not about saying, me boss, you flunky. Leadership stems from within. Leadership is about character. Leadership is about the fundamental qualities that engender trust from your subordinates. And that was a message that is imparted with you early on in officer training of the United States Army. From very little things to major things. For example, a very little thing, field exercise, when you're on a training exercise, when you're deployed. When it comes mealtime, your soldiers eat first. Then officers eat. Now that is a subtle message that says, look, the first thing that a leader needs to do is to take care of his or her subordinates. It's a very simple, but it's a very powerful message. So it's a long explanation to your question, Ken, but I think the most important aspect of leadership is to know that the leader is much more than a position or a boss. A leader is there to teach and serve his or her followers.
Yes, and you hear about soldiers now, young officers, and their number one duty is to bring their soldiers back safely from missions while achieving the objective. And one of the expressions I hear from Army officers, military officers, is this job of having to get 400 things done a day, and in very adverse situations. And that being very typical today, and sometimes 24/7 in an overseas deployment environment. How do officers learn to be able to handle that so that they can take care of their soldiers and achieve their missions?
You know, one of the things that goes back literally to the time of Aristotle. Aristotle wrote once about courage. And Aristotle said that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting in spite of fear. And I will paraphrase that and say that it's not simply absence of fear, but it's in the presence of stress, presence of danger, presence of discomfort. And when you're cold and tired and hungry, it's easy to think about yourself. But from the day you enter officer training, you're taught to think about your soldiers, think about your followers first. And when you do that, it will bring a certain calmness to them. The contemporary term in management is emotional intelligence, the ability to self-regulate. In the Army, we used to call that coolness under fire. It's something you're evaluated on from the day you enter the Army until the day you leave, coolness under fire. And it really teaches you the importance of staying in control, taking care of your soldiers. And it's something that is constantly emphasized.
Ray, tell us a little bit about your program at St. Peter's in leadership. You're part of the School of Business, and you also have the Center for Leadership Studies. Just tell us a little bit about the courses that you teach and the overall program.
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned, I was asked to teach leadership at St. Peter's. We have an introductory course, Principles of Leadership, which I teach, which is a required course for all management majors in the School of Business. But beyond that, I thought we could do a better job in teaching leadership. So we have introduced a course called Negotiation and Conflict Resolution, which I teach along with an attorney. And early on, I recognized that there should be a place where leadership learning and teaching excellence could come together. So I conceived and drafted a proposal for the creation of the Center of Leadership Studies. After a few iterations, it was accepted by the administration of the college, by the dean and provost, and was appropriately funded. Now, the Center for Leadership Studies at St. Peter's really has two focuses. The first is on research and teaching excellence, to make sure that our faculty are at the leading edge of understanding the forces that are at play in leadership education. The second is a regime of experiential learning for students. So we have a leadership fellow program where students are exposed to academic work, they're exposed to experiential learning, they're exposed to service learning, where they have to plan and execute a service learning project, which has to do with the local community. And so this center brings together all of those things. Additionally, we host once a semester a distinguished speaker series, and we bring in speakers from business, from education, from arts and entertainment, from the military, from law enforcement, and these are very well attended sessions by both students and faculty and alumni.
Very good. Those must be fascinating. And how do you find that leadership education in a civilian college works? We obviously see how it's taught at places like West Point or in ROTC programs, where there's a lot of physical activity involved, obstacle courses and the like to do. How is it compare in a civilian college environment teaching leadership?
Well, let me address that in two ways, Ken. I'm pretty familiar with the leadership curriculum at West Point. In fact, the colonel who currently heads that is a friend of mine, very, very smart guy. Colonel Lemler possesses a PhD from Columbia in psychology and leadership, and the physical dimension of it is for a purpose, and it is to put stress on the leadership candidate. Now, the reason you want to put stress on the candidate is to test this concept that we were talking about earlier, and West Point and the officer training academies and courses do a great job to try to simulate the stress of combat. Now, how do you simulate that? Well, you simulate that by physical exertion, by cold, by hunger, by dampness. But I would also hasten to point out that they spend a lot of time at West Point and at the service academies and the ROTC curriculum talking about the theories of leadership. What is it that makes a good leader? They talk a lot about that leadership has to spring from within. So the first part of leadership education at West Point is actually a self-evaluation, and then comes a peer evaluation. So the physical aspect is a technique, and they do it wonderfully. Unfortunately, we can't do that quite as well in a civilian environment. But I will tell you that I end each of my semesters, unfortunately could not do it because of COVID-19 last semester, but I end each of my semester courses in leadership with a leadership laboratory, where the students have to develop a experiential learning exercise involving leadership skills, such things as teamwork, communications, goal setting, problem solving. Now, the problems that they're solving are of a physical nature, but far less physical than an obstacle course for safety reasons and so forth. But we've had some very interesting exercises associated with the physical experiential learning. But the key is that the students are responsible for developing it, and they're responsible for executing it and leading it. And therein comes the leadership learning dimension of it.
Absolutely. Now, I have to ask you a question about your career, because when I was in graduate school in the 80s, the AT&T corporation was basically deregulated. and broken up into many different parts that became significant companies unto themselves. And you were right in the middle of all that, I've got to imagine. What do you remember about that period of deregulation that AT&T was the subject of?
Well, it's it's been the subject of many business books that have been written, and like most things, the future is very hard to foretell, right? So, the conventional wisdom in 1984, the year the actual breakup occurred, the conventional wisdom is that the future of AT&T would be in the long haul communications business and the confluence of that with computing. And hence AT&T purchased a mainframe and a point of sale company, NCR. Well, that was a terrible, terrible strategic move, okay? And so in 1984, actually AT&T completely missed two very, very important dynamics. And the first dynamic that they missed is, even though Bell Labs had invented cellular technology, they divested themselves of the cellular business and didn't reacquire it until the mid-1990s.
Well, that was something, because it was such a big impact. I remember doing some graduate school studies on it at the time, but you were in the middle of it. And then you mentioned mobile and the technologies that came out in that period. I always look at fiber optic cable as such a huge innovation, and then also things like barcodes, and then obviously the internet came around. What was it like to be in mid-career when all of that technology was starting to enter the marketplace?
Well, it was an exhilarating time for sure. In fact, I was, from the mid-'80s onward, I was in AT&T International, and I was there when the first intercontinental fiber optic cable was laid. That was the so-called TAT, transatlantic cable number 8, was laid between North America and continental Europe. And that was a thrilling time. And then a year later, that was 1988, 1989, the first trans-Pacific cable was laid between Hawaii and Japan. Another thrilling time. So you had enormous infrastructure that was being built. Tom Friedman, in his book, The World is Flat, actually chronicled those times as some of the key enablers behind that. But another dynamic that occurred as a result of that breakup was the emergence of the dominance of the local companies. So today, I mean, the AT&T that exists was really purchased by SBC, the local company in Texas, and it is essentially a broadband and entertainment company. So they bought Time Warner. And the other piece of it, of course, is Verizon, a mobile and a local company. So no one envisioned that. No one envisioned that. And the long distance business is very much a commodity business today. And of course, the mainframe computing business, AT&T later divested itself. So the whole point there is that it's very difficult to foretell the future, because no one foresaw how the telecommunications world would eventually emerge.
How do you see, just on the technology future, how do you see the implementation of 5G going? It seems to be slow, deliberate. It seems like it's a major change in all the elements of service delivery, new phones, but also new ways of distributing the service in communities around the country. What's your thought about implementation of 5G?
Yeah, it's really not a device problem. These devices, the latest device from Apple, the iPhone 12 is 5G capable. It's really a last mile problem. Okay, the core backbone of all the fiber networks can certainly handle 5G. But that last mile, in the cellular world, in the mobile world, are those tens of thousands of local antenna that communicate from your device to the nearest cellular relay site, switching point. So it'll take time for the carriers to build that out. Obviously, metropolitan areas are going to go first, and then you'll see dispersion across the country. Do I see that coming? Absolutely. But is it going to be this year or next? No. But you will see it in metropolitan areas, and I think that it will be a major factor, because if there is one thing that mobile telephony has proven, is if the carriers developed higher and higher speed of bandwidth, then applications will emerge to fill it up. Gaming applications, entertainment applications, streaming services, enormous potential there.
Certainly, and certainly the video conferencing that everyone is doing now, and especially to help schools like yours. Now, I got to ask you, you invited me a few years ago to a remarkable conference when you were at Donnelly Marketing, and one of your special guests was quite a leader, a bit controversial, but President Bill Clinton. And I was thrilled to get a chance to say hello to him. And he gave a remarkable speech at dinner talking about what the century was going to look like. What was it like to be able to spend time with President Clinton?
Well, he is, to use your words, remarkable indeed. A Rhodes Scholar, he's a brilliant guy. And one of the things that strikes you is his range of interests. I mean, I sat 5 feet away from him. Actually, my son, who was 14 at the time, sat right next to him. What strikes you is his range of interests. In a matter of an hour and a half over dinner, I think we covered African foreign policy, California wine, golf, the current status of the Yankees, and his outlook for the charting of the human genome. So he has a tremendous range of interests and can speak with eloquence and knowledge about a tremendously wide range of interests, from politics to sports to fine food to current events. I mean, you name it, he can do it.
Yeah, his speech I thought was absolutely remarkable, and his insight about all the different tension areas in the world and areas that the United States would have to deal with in this century. Now, I just thought maybe we'd wrap up today. I know you have to go teach a class, but I'd like to hear just your thoughts on what is it going to take for the economy to reboot. We're 6 months now into this COVID pandemic. We didn't think it was going to be this long. We all thought it might be over by the summertime, but now it looks like it's going to go well into next year. What are the keys in your mind for the economy and our society to recover from this pandemic?
Yeah, I think that the key, and I'll put that singular, the key to the economic recovery is the recovery from the pandemic. It has to go in that order. And I'm not making that up. I'm a believer in data. I'm a believer in analogs. After 35 years in business, one of the most important lessons that I learned is always examine best practices. Figure out who's doing it best, and then try to model your actions against it. So look at New Zealand as an example, okay? And by the way, the Prime Minister of New Zealand just last week was reelected with 68% of the vote, 68% in a parliamentary system with multiple parties. They took very stringent methods early on in the pandemic, in terms of social distancing, in terms of shutdown, in terms of masking, in terms of travel restrictions, very stringent methods, and they worked. But there also was a sense of national unity around that. It wasn't politicized. That was true in Iceland. It was true in New Zealand. It was true in Finland. It was true, and you might say, well, those are all very small countries. That's right. But it was also true to a certain degree in Germany as well, a very large country. So once that pandemic had been stemmed, then the economy is emerging. Now, you may have seen the economic data out of China that was just released earlier this week, yesterday. And China GDP is now greater than it was pre-pandemic. And there has been no cases in China, including in the province where it started. But again, they took very stringent, very draconian methods. I have two students from China, and I asked them about this. Both of them answered in a similar way. By the way, one is from Shanghai, and one is from near Beijing. So they're not even close as far as geographically proximate. But both of them had similar remarks when I asked them why it seemed to go so well in China. Both of them said words to the effect of, because we wanted to do right by our country, because we wanted to do the right thing. If you think about how this nation harkened back in those dark days after December 7th, 1941, you saw this national unity against a common enemy. We have not seen that in this country today. In fact, it's become politicized. So economic recovery will only occur after we get the pandemic under control. And when it does, you're going to see a lot of latent pent-up demand that will fuel a recovery. But that's not going to happen until it's under control.
Very good. And Ray Butkus, Executive Lecturer at St. Peter's University. Maybe a final thought about what students will learn by participating in your leadership program there.
Well, Ken, let me wrap it up by saying this, that one of the messages that I always leave students of leadership is that leadership is as much about who you are and what you stand for as the position you hold. So leadership is not about being the boss or giving direction. Leadership is about character. It's about integrity. And my message to them is that the real qualities of character that have to do with excellent leadership are such things as integrity and trust and confidence and truthfulness. And when your followers know that they can count on you, to use an Army expression, they have your back. He has my back, or she has my back. When they know that, you will have great ability to influence their behavior. So it's a whole different way of looking at leadership that some students, when they walk into the course, they really think it's about giving you tools and techniques to be a better direction giver. I read a lot about leadership, and candidly, most of the books are worthless because there are 10 steps to leadership or 9 steps. Leadership is not a cookbook. It's not a recipe. It's not, if you do these 9 things, you'll be a good leader. You won't. Leadership is about integrity. It's about your character. I will leave it there.
Certainly, integrity and character are the cornerstones of leadership. And you exemplify that, Ray Butkus. Glad to call you a fellow graduate of Providence College. And extraordinary business career, and now teaching, giving back to today's students at St. Peter's University over in New Jersey. And you are the founder of the Center for Leadership Studies. Great to visit with you today.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real delight, and well done on this interview series. Very, very impressive. So well done to you.
Thank you. Hopefully we can do it again. Ray Butkus, Executive Lecturer at St. Peter's University. And this is Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services Talking Business. We always want to shout out to our staff in Harrison, New York, who have been taking care of our clients in the banking and payments field all during this pandemic. And so from my home office in White Plains, New York, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you next time.